Element 115. There's been a discussion reignited about this, and it all has to do with the intro to Astra Melorum, because a lot of people, myself included, are thinking that we may have just seen 115 again. But for the people who really been paying attention, you would know that this discussion about 115 has been going on even before that, even in Ashes of the Damned. But if you were really paying attention, it was even going back all the way to the first reintroduction to Richtofen from this game. And we'll get into all of that, but before we do, as always with story videos, I love hearing your guys' input on all of this. Let me know if you could expand any theories, have any theories of your own, or maybe I made a mistake somewhere. Let me know about them all down in the comment section below. And hey, while you're down there, drop a like and subscribe. But with that said, let's talk about Element 115. So the first thing we need to ask ourselves, is Element 115 actually back? Well, I mean, if we look at what we saw in the intro cutscene to Astra Melorum, you see these giant meteor rocks, and they have mainly rock-looking areas, but then every now and then you see these blue glowing spots. And as anybody who's paid attention to the Ether storyline post-Origins, you would know that that's pretty similar to how 115 looked in that game. I mean, if we want to be really nitpicky here, we could say that, I mean, the blue glowing spots do look a bit different because they look just like the rock was glowing there in the old 115, whereas this one, they kind of look crystally. But I feel like we're just splitting hairs, honestly, and that may just be for this intro because it is a high quality intro. But regardless, I still think no matter how you look at it, it does look very similar. But it's not just that, because if you actually look at when we first got introduced to this version of Richtofen, I mean, we heard that he was a part of Group 935, and Group 935 in the old timeline completely revolved around Element 115. So if he's with Group 935, I mean, you gotta assume he has something to do with 115. I mean, obviously you could just say that, well, in this version of it, they were actually doing Aetherium instead of 115, and that's fine. But then we actually get the map Ashes of the Damned, and we hear Richtofen directly talk about this. And these quotes I tried to collect myself, but for some reason they just won't trigger for me, and it got me frustrated because you have to get pretty far into the Easter egg to actually trigger these. But you guys are just going to have to trust me, because for some reason I can't get them to trigger. But I will tell you what happens and how you activate them. The first time Richtofen says anything in relation to 115 is when you're doing the canister step and you're putting it into the power pumps. You see it filling up with this blue liquid, and what Richtofen says is that the color reminds him of the element. And I mean, if we look at the color that the canister is being filled up with, it's that blue liquid look. And I mean, if you remind yourself of how 115 looked, especially in the Origins generators, I mean, it looked almost exactly like that, which may start a whole discussion if these power pumps were powered by 115 or what. That's a whole side thing on its own, but it doesn't end there, because after that, when you actually get the necrofluid gauntlet, sometimes Richtofen will say that the weapon is probably powered by 115. And that's it. I mean, that has to confirm that 115 is back, right? He said it right there. He said the numbers. And that to me confirms that 115 in some capacity is back. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves, because there's always been a little discussion about 115 and Aetherium, because some people have claimed that 115 and Aetherium are actually just the same thing. And this has been an open question for a while now, but we have to talk about it, because I know one thing that people will immediately say is that 115 and Aetherium look different. I mean, obviously there's a color, one's blue and one's purple, but wait, don't get too ahead of yourself, because remember that the color of 115 actually changed over time itself. Like, originally it was kind of a weird red glow, and then we've even seen it looking green at times, and then it became like blue. And what would be so crazy about it now being purple? Like, that's not the craziest thing in the world. And that's definitely true, but I think that if we look more into that, there's some things that are definitely different. I mean, 115 never really looked crystallized, whereas you see Aetherium in its natural form, it's crystallized, which is interesting. But, you know, that's just a small little thing. But I think the biggest things, if you look at the differences between the two, is just how they work so different. And sure, there's big similarities too, that they're used to cause zombie outbreaks, and even people are building wonder weapons out of these things. Those are definitely true, but how they affect humans is also very different, because how they're affecting humans, Element 115, that will make you delusional, have memory loss, even make you violent, whereas with Aetherium, we don't see those same things. We don't see the delusion to the same level. We never even heard of memory loss from Aetherium or anything like that. Like, these are very different symptoms. And in fact, Aetherium is more of something that even infects the air that you breathe. And when you get infected by that Aetherium, it could affect you in different ways, even changing your body, where we've never heard of 115 doing that, because you hear people who had been in the Dark Ether exposed to Aetherium for a long time, they change to become something different, where 115 just doesn't do that. It doesn't affect you in that way. Now, some people may argue that, sure, they're different in how they affect people, but maybe this is 115 that's been in the Dark Ether for so long, so it changed, and sure, maybe that's a possibility. But the final thing that for me confirms that 115 and Aetherium are different is actually two things. But first off is the fact that 115 can let you time travel. That was a very key thing about it in the original story, whereas Aetherium is very limited by this, because at the start of this Dark Ether story, they wanted to limit especially time travel. There was time dilation, but that's not the same as time traveling, but they wanted to limit it, and that limited Aetherium. And that's a very, very important difference between these two elements. And you may say that this just makes obviously 115 more powerful, but let's not get too much ahead of ourselves, because keep in mind, all 115 was banished to the Dark Ether. Yet when it was in the Dark Ether, did it take over the Dark Ether? No. Do you know what did though? Aetherium took over. Aetherium is everywhere in the Dark Ether. Way more of it than any 115 that we've ever seen before. So clearly, Aetherium is more powerful than 115 in some way. We're just not entirely sure in which way. Maybe it's more infectious, could spread easier, and it's more alive than 115, but I mean, we'll just have to wait and see, because now it's starting to get really interesting now that there is both 115, Aetherium, and not to mention Prima Materia is still somewhere out there. But now that we could probably agree that 115 is back and it's different than Aetherium, we have to understand how big this is, because the unique abilities of 115 are very significant. Because keep in mind that not only did 115 let people time travel, but also it let people jump from different dimensions, different universes. That was something that was unique about it. And in fact, we actually learned in the OG story from Maxis himself that 115 is the fabric of space-time that connected the multiverse. And that's exactly why in both the plans that Nikolai had to end the multiverse, and even Monty in Revelations, that the whole goal was to get rid of all of the 115. Now, it was never clear exactly what Monty planned to do with all the 115. I mean, he just threw it all randomly somewhere from what it sounded like. But then we had Nikolai in his story, because we have Nikolai in what he actually did, because what he did was threw it all into the Dark Ether. And this was to end the multiverse. This is how to end the multiverse. This was how to end the corruption of 115, because 115 was not only at fault for the zombie outbreaks, but was also at fault for the multiverse existing to begin with. And this is exactly why in the Revelations intro cutscene, we see the Apothicans spreading 115 to all the universes, because they wanted to continue the multiverse. And this really all starts to make sense with what we are seeing in this Black Ops 7 zombie story. Because in this story, we see literally the return of the multiverse. We literally have 4 of the OG characters, all from their own unique timelines. And I mean, the second we saw the multiverse back, we probably should have assumed that 115 was back, because 115 was the whole reason why the multiverse existed. So us being surprised by this, if we were really paying attention, we really shouldn't have been, because this has to make sense. This is the reason why the multiverse exists. But what does this mean for the story going forward? Well, not only does this mean that we can have time travel again, and even a multiverse again, and travel between that multiverse, but there's a bigger question there, and that's who found the banished 115 in the Dark Ether, and then who utilized it to remake the multiverse. Because the multiverse was closed off. That's exactly what Nikolai did in Tog Their Toten. So who ruined all of that? Well, I mean, already we may have a little bit of a hint, because where did we even see these 115 rocks even come from to begin with? In that intro to Astra Melorum. Well, they just didn't appear out of nowhere. They actually came from the same place that our characters came from, and that's from the mouth of the entity. And that gets me oddly suspicious of this entity, because I'm not the first one to point out that it looks oddly similar to what she was doing in this intro to what the Apothicans were doing in the intro to Revelations, seeding the universe with 115, so it could spread its corruption to each and every corner of it. And what if that's what the entity is doing? And the real villain of this story is the one we're helping right now. She's doing exactly what the Apothicans did from the past. And I remind you, the Apothicans were the bad guys. But it doesn't have to end here. I'd love for you guys to continue this and share your theories on exactly what you think is happening here and who is spreading the 115 and who is causing the multiverse to reappear. Do you think it's the entity, something else, or even something even deeper than that? Let me know all of your theories, thoughts, and ideas down in the comment section below. Regardless though, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.